Since we're in the city of fountains, we've made it a point on Arts Upload to keep our fountains in focus.
Through a regular segment called My Favorite Fountain. And this week we'll show you one that could use a little TLC.
The Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fountain is at 43rd and Broadway, where Michael Foki reflected on it with producer-videographer Dave Burkhardt.
This is my favorite fountain because it's Kansas City. Veterans coming together, serving in a war no one agrees upon, but doing it with love and respect. Got brothers and sisters. That's why it's my favorite. It's fellow countrymen. When you come here, you should feel a sense of serenity and calm and love, because each one of these flowers and trees represent a different piece of what war reflects to veterans. Different areas to honor your fallen after the war, different place behind us to honor those that are POW and MIA and the ones killed in action. You have red flowers for the blood that's shed. Every tree, majority of them in here, blooms a red color for the blood that was shed in the fall and in the winter. And then you have these trees here, these evergreens. They're supposed to be 5 trees for 5 branches of service, and they're supposed to be evergreens to give the veterans privacy when they're coming, the family's privacy when they're coming up to mourn the loss. You also have an area that says, "Goodbye, my friend." And that is a way that somebody that's passing, they can come and lay flowers for those that have lost. When you walk into the fountain, if you're coming from the Westport area, you're going to notice the 2 fountains that you have here. And both fountains represent the 2 opinions of the difference in agreement to where Kansas City was at the time of the war. This year marks the 30th anniversary of the wall. They're going to come here and actually celebrate their lives, celebrate the ones they lost, and just take in the rapture of what this memorial represents. Hopefully, maybe some cleanup might happen. Hopefully afterwards this engages people to come out and look on what needs to happen. And most of it's just, people need to show some love and respect. People should come here because this is your family on that wall. This is your brothers and sisters, your aunts, your uncles, your cousins, your nephews, because they did so much and sacrificed so much for us as a nation.